This is a critical versus. Goldfish is changing its name to Chilean sea bass. Here's why. Why is a false question to Goat vs. Fish? Who is Goat vs. Fish? What is Goat vs. Fish? Why is Goat vs. Fish? There is only one true question. Are you goat or are you fish? And Goldfish has been an amazing fish for many verses. Even the goat, who are versus the fish, cannot deny the power of the goldfish, the very popular goldfish, snacking fish, cheesy fish. Goat have cheese, fish have cheese too. Goldfish crackers, cheesy fish. Recently, cheesy fish has been putting on sunglasses to become a cool fish. Goldfish have become rainbowification in recent verses. They've become spicy in recent verses. Goldfish has been making big verses of evolution to versus that goat, and now Goldfish is changing its name to Chilean sea bass? Well, when you have chosen fish, you can be any kind of fish that you wish. When you have chosen goat, you can be any kind of goat. That versus fish. So let's have a look at this verses. Let's have a look at this verses. Goat versus fish. And can we have a versus here? Look at this versus, goat and fish. Look at this versus. Fine dining with fish. Fine dining with fish. Even that little fish. A singular goldfish. And all this utensilary. Pretty fancy fish, pretty fancy fish. New York, CNN. Goldfish crackers are synonymous with hungry kids. But the company is betting on a sophisticated name change that could expand the audience. Well, let Goat vs. Fish tell you something about kids. Kids are baby goat. Kids are baby goat. And hungry kids like to versus fish, and hungry kids like goldfish. But perhaps goldfish are not just for versing baby goat. They want fully mature goat to versus the fish. The Pepperidge Farm snack is tweaking its name for a limited time to, quotation, Chilean sea bass, quotation, a more grown-up title, thanks to fence, a strategy to attract adults and reestablish its relevance amid a broader decline in snacking following the fence-demic peak. Oh my verses, there was decline in snacking during the fence-demic. You remember the great fence-demic? Where goat and fish had to stay 6 verses apart. Oh, the goat and fish, 6 verses apart had to stay the goat and fish. And you're telling Goat vs. Fish that there was a decline in snacking during the fence-demic, heckin' random, with a 1-month gifted verses to Chilean sea bass appreciation. It's a gifted verses. Heckin' random, that is a gifted verses for fish. That's a gifted verses for fish. Heckin' random, are you goat or fish? Gifted verses to Chilean sea bass celebration for fish. Random verses, what are random verses? Goat versus fish, the goatfish can tell you that we had a very marked increase in our snacking during the fence-demic. You tell Goat versus Fish. Did you snack more during the fence-demic? Ah, yes. A decline in snacking following the fence-demic peak. Well, listen, goat, they climb up the mountain, they climb back down again to versus the fish. So there was a peak versus during the fence-demic, and now Chilean sea bass is getting all upset because it's not as high as it once was. Well, just bring back the fence-demic, why don't you? Just manufacture another fence-demic, and then you can have an increase in snacking once again. Be careful what you verse for, goldfish crackers. Despite rebranding as a popular seafood item, the recipe and appearance of the snack aren't changing, so it's still fish. Do not despair, it's not becoming goat or any verses. Goldfish explained in a press release that the much more adult name is to reinforce that goldfish crackers are... We just read this verses! What was this verses written by artificial intelligence? Oh, my verses. Come on, Jordan Valinsky, get on your verses. You said in the verses, the first verses, Goldfish crackers are synonymous with hungry kids, but the company's betting on a sophisticated name change that could expand the audience. And now in this verse, just 2 verses later, you say that Goldfish explained in a press release that the much more adult name is to reinforce that Goldfish crackers are not just for kids. We just heard that verses. Get on with the verses! Pointing to the growth of trends popularized by Generation Z and millennials on TikToks, where you can follow GoatVsFish, such as making girl dinners. Are girls goat or fish? Are girls goat or fish? Are girls goat or are they fish? Celebration, celebration. Quotation, we know goldfish are a lunchbox icon, but the truth is they're loved by snackers of all ages. Well, if that's a true verses, then shouldn't you already be selling goldfish to adult goat and fish? So it's a playful reminder. They just want to remind you. We just want to remind you that you like fish. Hey, goat. Hey, goat. This is just a reminder from GoatVsFish. Hey, adult goat, remember those fish? Do you remember the 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 fish? Remember the fish! Remember the fish! Remember the fish! Remember the fish! And by the verses, remember GoatVsFish. Please remember GoatVsFish and remember to follow GoatVsFish. Remember GoatVsFish. A playful reminder, you say? We thought this was an adult verses. Is it a playful verses or is it an adult verses? Playful versus adult is a false verses. Some say GoatVsFish is adult, some say GoatVsFish is playful. We went ahead and gave, they continue, our iconic cheddar cracker a new fun grown-up name. It's fun. What could be more fun than a Chilean sea bass? But, and here comes the fence, the Chilean sea bass snacks won't appear on shelves. Oh my verses. Bags featuring the branding are only being sold online beginning Wednesday verses, and just for 1 week, Goldfish reminds the goat and fish in the universe that the traditionally branded bags are still available now and always at retailers nationwide. You see, the fish, they fear change, fish. They fear change. The fish wants to change, but it fears to change. The fish, this could be an evolution for fish. This could be an evolution for fish. They make a big verses. Fish makes a big verses. Oh, we're going to change our verses rather playfully to Chilean sea bass. However, we're not actually going to manufacture them at any scale nor send them to any stores. You just have to buy them on the interwebiverse. GoatVsFish wants to be walking around the verses. GoatVsFish wants to be there, shopping for goat, shopping for fish, marketing GoatVsFish. And we want to look at the verses, and we want to see a golden Chilean sea bass looking at GoatVsFish. They deny this verses to GoatVsFish. That would be a playful verses. That would be a whimsical verses. But no, you just have to buy it off the interwebiverse. We think GoatVsFish is going to buy it on the interwebiverse. And Thunderhead81 just followed GoatVsFish on TikTok celebration. But maybe GoatVsFish will buy the Chilean sea bass for GoatVsFish. After all, it is GoatVsFish. We should conduct an investigation about the cheesy Chilean sea bass fish. In fact, the tweaked name is a nod to its roots. Roots. Are roots goat or fish? Pepperidge Farm launched Goldfish in the American States of Unitedness in 1962, initially aimed at adults as a bar snack. Well, bars are for fences. Bars are for fences. Since the 1990s, however, Goldfish have been sold as a snack for baby goat with playful packaging. So we see goat and fish. Originally, when you were drinking like a fish, you would enjoy some cheesy inebriation, but then the baby goats got a hold of it, and then they started marketing to kids, and now they want to get back at the adults again. They want to say, Please drink these cheesy fish when you are enjoying inebriation. We beg of thee. We beg of thee. Get drunk and consume Chilean sea bass. The clever stunt is a simple way to remind customers that goldfish exist amid growing competition from upstarts, according to Nate Rosen, who we do not know if they are goat or fish. Nate Rosen, are you goat or fish? The founder of Express Checkout, Oh My Fences, a newsletter that tracks consumer packaged goods and trends. There is no good or evil, there is only goat and fish. Quotation, with so many new brands creating trendy looking and better for you versions of consumers' favorite childhood snacks, I think it's clear indication that they need to be reminded of their beloved classics that inspired these copycats. Is a cat a goat or a fish? You hear it, goat and fish. You need to be reminded. You need to be reminded. You need to be reminded about goat versus fish. You need to be reminded as a kid about goat versus fish. You need to be reminded as an adult about goat versus fish. When you become a kid and then you become an adult, you need to be reminded about goat versus fish. When you age in reverse, you need to be reminded about goat versus fish. You constantly need to be reminded about goat versus fish. Don't you love goat versus fish? Remember how you love goat versus fish? Remember how you enjoy goat versus fish? Remember how playful is goat versus fish? Remember when you got drunk and consumed goat versus fish? Remember when you were a kid and enjoyed goat versus fish? There are many imitators of goat versus fish. There are many imitators of goat versus fish, but there's only one true versus of goat versus fish, and you will continue to purchase goat versus fish, and you will continue to give your American dollar to goat versus fish, and you will continue to follow goat versus fish, and you will continue to love goat versus fish. It's just a friendly reminder of goat versus fish. It's just a friendly reminder of goat versus fish, and as a matter of a playful versus to appeal to all the young goat and fish, we're going to change our verses to fish versus goat. Because as long as the goat are versus the fish, and as long as the fish are versus the goat, it's still goat versus fish. Goat versus fish should make a limited edition shirt that says fish versus goat. That would be a fine versus. That would be a fine versus. If this fish is going to continue to remind you how much you love the fish, then goat versus fish is going to remind you how much you love goat versus fish, because the goat are loved just as much as the fish. Depending on the verses, depending on the verses, depending on if you're a goat or fish, and goat versus fish. New brands. Goldfish is not a new brand. Goldfish is not a new brand, they would have you believe, but goat versus fish is the original brand. Goat versus fish is the original brand. The original brand is goat versus fish. And goldfish is just a derivation of goat versus fish, and so is Chilean sea bass. Goat versus fish can't help but ponder as we look at this, that this whole entire article on CNN is just a big promotion for fish. Can you trust the mainstream media, these verses? Can you trust the mainstream media? Stream is a place where fish swim. Stream is a place where fish swim, and look at what they're putting in the mainstream media. They're just inundating it with fish. Goat versus fish suspects that Chilean sea bass purchased the verses so that we could see this, and they call it news, goat and fish. They call it the new verses. They call it the new verses, but really it's just a fence-vertisement for fish. This is fish-aganda. This is fish-aganda. Goats, rise up. The fish-aganda has infiltration. The CNN. CNN is infiltration by fish. It's fish media. It's fish media. Reminding you how much you love fish. Reminding you how much that baby goats love fish. Well, where's the golden goat? Where's the golden goat? Where's the goat crackers? We want a fair and balanced versus. We want a fair and balanced versus on goat versus fish. CNN, are you goat or are you fish? CNN, are you goat or are you fish? This has been a critical versus. Follow Goat vs. Fish on all social media at Goat vs. Fish. Are you goat or are you fish?